You know what they should call doing cocaine in Canada?
What?
Spending loonies and toonies until I get the zoomies.
Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein. Come in. Jeffrey Epstein.
Hello. I'm glad to say hello. My name is Liz.
What is that? I'm glad to say hello.
Well,
I'm not glad to say hello. I'm sad to say hello because you know what? A hello, that means there's going to be a goodbye. In there.
You say goodbye and I say hello.
not in Hawaiian. It's the same word.
Really?
Or in Hebrew.
Hello in Hawaiian. My name is Brace.
I'm Liz.
Of course, joined by producer Young Chomsky in the podcast.
It's called TrueAnon. Hello.
Hello. We are sorry. Folks, we are tired.
No.
Y'all, the Jews and Poles are tired. We are tired.
You know what we're not tired of?
What? Adolf Hitler, who comes up a lot in this episode. No, we're not tired of him as in we like
Did we
him.
talk about him a lot in this episode? I think it was the last episode we talked about him.
But he's cast a shadow, a mustachioed shadow. I was thinking about this. Where are the other Hitlers? Not like Boys from Brazil style, but like obviously he wasn't just the only Hitler.
Okay.
And like I know about his family or whatever, but like surely there was like a Mark Hitler and like, you know, who
Oh, I
lived in
see.
like
You mean
Munich.
literally like the family tree?
No, just other because it's just like how not like necessarily his family, but just like how uncommon of a last name was Hitler, you know? That's my question.
There's that guy on Twitter who's like John Hitler.
Oh, that's John, but it's with two T's. That is true.
Yeah.
There's John Hitler. But
Yeah,
like
I think I would change my name in that situation.
it was funny. They try to call him. There was like a Trump style thing where the U.S. tried to call him Schicklgruber because that was like his mom's maiden name or something. He would have, but I do agree that
It's
I
not
don't
very catchy.
he would have not made it that far with
No.
Schicklgruber.
No,
I
not
don't
at
think
all.
that the Germans would have liked it.
So, we are back. It's part 2 of our episode on Brace. Why don't you intro this a little bit?
Well, this is really about historical revisionism in Canada, especially as it relates to the Victims of Communism Memorial that they have spent an untold amount of, well, actually it is told, it's like $7.5 million in preparation to build without even building it yet. But really, it's a lot to do with memory and the way that memory is presented and the Canadian government's complicity with an international, decades-long attempt at Holocaust revisionism by a lot of people who did the Holocaust.
So, to help us with that, we have, as always from last episode, you like how I did that one?
I do.
Dan Beckner, who is so fantastic to talk to with all of this and has done so much of his own research into the people putting together this crazy monument to the victims of communism in Canada. So let's talk to him about it.
We're thrilled to have with us today in exile. In fact, president of the Canadian government in exile, Dan Beckner.
Ahoian exile.
That's right. I'm hard at work getting a position at OSU. It's going to be called Canadian Studies, and I'm going to basically do a little historical revisionism on Canada. We're going to get rid of some of the bad things that we did, kind of amplify some of the good stuff we did.
Yeah, only Ford Brothers.
Yeah.
The
From here
band,
on
Broken Social Scene, no longer exists in the American public consciousness.
Yes. But I have to ask you something, because you Canadian. What is TrueAnon?
Oh, yeah. What is that?
TrueAnon is like K-Hive for Justin Trudeau. I'm sorry.
Okay, they're
okay,
pro-Trudeau.
We need to just pause for a second because to our listeners, they don't understand this, but we get mentions. Is that what you call it?
I would say
on
we
the
get
social media.
Yeah, mentions.
You get
Mentions. Yeah. Well, they'll be like, TrueAnon did this. And it's been going on for years since I would say COVID. I think it was
Yep.
COVID is when this really started popping off.
Yes.
Where it would be all over social media, and it would be all these Canadians getting very angry at TrueAnon. And we'd be like, what the fuck? And it took us a while. And then we realized, oh, this isn't about us.
Yeah.
So, but I've never really looked into it. I thought it was like QAnon adjacent, but I don't think I think it's a flip on. It's like a
it's
twist
anti-QAnon.
Anti-QAnon. So that's why it's called TrueAnon, which, okay, I get where you're going with that one.
During the pandemic, we had that was like the major containment breach of American psychosis into the Canadian sort of information sphere. And a lot of people got into QAnon. The pandemic really polarized people. A lot of uncles spending time on Facebook. And, the counter force to that was TrueAnon, as in Trudeau Fans Anonymous.
That's what this podcast is
so
for.
Fucking stupid.
Oh, no.
I hate Justin Trudeau, dude. He
So
fucking
do I.
sucks.
Yeah, he stinks.
I know. You know how like Canada, it kills like everyone with MAID or whatever now. Like they just
Yeah, you can be like they didn't have the classic Tim Horton crawler at my Etobicoke Tim Hortons location, and I would like to apply for MAID, and they're like, here you go.
We should really do an episode on that because the MAID shit in Canada is fucking crazy. But Justin Trudeau, if you are listening to this, MAID, that is your way out. It is not looking good for you in the future. Pierre Poilievre will be in power, and he will put you in Canadian prison where you probably get only PS 1 or 2. And
Didn't you hang out with his brother recently?
Oh, fuck, I did.
Yeah.
At the
I
DNC.
forgot about that.
I know his fucking brother, dude. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have his brother's phone number.
Get him on
But
the
it's
pod.
like erstwhile brother.
It's a half brother, I think. So he's
They
not.
don't seem to be very close.
No, I don't think he likes him.
You got to ask his estranged erstwhile brother because I have long suspected that Justin Trudeau has a huge Red Hot Chili Peppers tattoo somewhere on his body.
Wait, what makes you suspect that?
He just seems like that type of guy.
Oh, okay. I thought
Yeah.
maybe you saw something.
Yeah.
No.
Like you saw just like a tiny little, like the edge of a little.
I feel like
think
when he
he's-
has sex,
he's
he
got a
does it like
Pepsi
the
tattoo.
worm.
Yeah, totally.
I hate Justin Trudeau. I don't like him. His brother is goated. Listeners to our DNC coverage will remember that his brother was driving an RV across the country for RFK Jr. I wonder how he's doing now. He's probably just a Trump guy now, I guess.
He's signed up for MAID.
He's signed up for MAID. Yeah. Crazy. We're talking about a different pro-mass killing organization, though. We're talking about historical revisionism in Canada, its proponents, its utility to Canada in the Cold War, and its manifestations today. We have with us, if you couldn't tell, that you probably listened to the last episode, why would you be listening to this? It's probably has part 2 in the name without
I'm
listening to
back.
that. But we have Dan Beckner, who was at one point, I believe, connected romantically with Neil Peart.
That's true. We had to break up because he died.
Yeah, made.
Well,
made.
made.
Well,
Yeah,
and
Made took out half a rush.
And ideologically, he loves Ayn Rand. He would always be like, "Hey, have you listened to 2112? Listen to the song I wrote. It's called The Trees. It's about how the oaks crowd out the light for the other trees. Have you read The Fountainhead?" And it was exhausting. But he's such a great drummer.
Neil Peart was a big Ayn Rand guy.
Oh yeah, I mean, if you listen to any of the Rush, like listen to Farewell.
No,
okay.
I don't like Rush.
Okay,
I don't
I'm sorry,
like
I
Brace.
don't like Rush.
I'm
They're not
sorry,
good.
Liz.
The
I'm
real
not
time says I don't like it.
Yeah,
I really don't
Not
like
my-
it.
Yeah, don't. Well, yeah, women are not supposed to be involved in Rush.
But I don't think that it's good or healthy for people to listen
You
to.
love Rush, Dan?
I have a soft spot for Rush, and I think that's because I'm medically. You know how some people are medically stupid. I'm medically Canadian, so
Oh, okay, I understand.
Someone once told me that Rush is music for guys who masturbate while looking in the mirror, and it's really stuck with me.
that's interesting.
without putting any judgments on anybody here and without admitting to anything, is that bad to do?
Not.
You're
I mean,
shaking-
If you're listening to Rush,
if you're listening to Rush,
Okay,
it's
but if
bad
I'm
to
like
me.
if I'm like listening to
now
like
I have like stuck in my head.
I have.
I feel like a kind of like some chimes or like in the back of my head.
I listen to Last Poets and do it.
Brace, what you got to do is listen to Godspeed You Black Emperor and look at yourself in the mirror and jerk off.
I've
You
never
have
heard
to.
that band. I've never heard
to
that
do
band.
it.
But the Diodes, that was a great Toronto band.
Yeah,
back
tired
in
of
the day.
waking up tired.
I'm telling you, I got that single.
Where did we leave things off?
So, okay. World War II tragically, actually, it's good that it ended.
Tragically ended.
It ended
R.I.P. World
Tragically
War II.
ended is the Canadian spin
Well, it ended-
on World War II.
Well, if you really
Exactly.
wanted to kill every single Jew in Europe, as some of our people featured in this tale did, subjects did, it's tragic because you're like, no, we were so close.
We almost did it.
We almost did it. But World War II is over. The Canadian government in the period of like 1945, 1946 to the middle 50s relaxes its immigration restrictions on people who did the Holocaust more and more and more and more, while basically preventing anybody who has any kind of left-wing beliefs from entering the country. And specifically at this point, we ended on a bomb attack by the Waffen-SS, possibly by Waffen-SS veterans, on a left-wing Ukrainian hall at a children's performance. And, you know, one of the things we mentioned in the last episode was the need for labor in Canada in the immediate post-war, I guess, economic scene. And
I would say labor in Canada in general, like that's an important thing to understand about Canada. You know, on my old show, we used to say Canada is 3 mining companies in a trench coat. And it is true that this very empty country that was taken away from its indigenous population runs, as much as we'd like to present as like, you know, a country that has intellectual capital and is like kind of like Sweden or Denmark. We run on pulling shit out of the ground, processing it, and selling it. That's what we do here. So labor is still important and always was super important to Canada's just ability to exist as a nation.
Now, where do the Waffen-SS factor into this?
Well, let's say you run, let's say you own a nickel smelting plant, right?
I like this.
Let's say you're refining nickel, and the guys who are refining the nickel at the smelting plant, they got some ideas about how long they're working for, or whether they should get time off, or the safety of working conditions. How do you turn the tide? You know, how do you put the right ideas into this pool? And the answer is you import ex-Waffen-SS members and give them jobs at the plant to spy on unions and discipline the labor base.
Yeah, I mean, this is a sort of extraordinary episode in Canadian history because it seems like it happened at multiple places. Canadian companies purposely bringing over people who did the Holocaust, in which 6 million Jews died or were killed, into their workplaces to hurt the people that work there already? Am I getting that straight? So where did this happen? The most famous incident of this was at a massive Inco mine. That's the company, Inco, nickel mine and smelter in Sudbury, Ontario, which is, honestly, one of the bleakest places I've ever been in my life. It's famous in Canada for having the world's largest nickel.
Wait, what do you mean? How
mean by
big
that.
is it?
It's fucking enormous. It's like 2.5 stories tall. It is a giant
I feel like
nickel.
we could build a bigger nickel than that.
What do you mean
You
nickel?
definitely could, but it's just like, why would you?
What the fuck are you guys talking about? A nickel, like of the
like
coin?
5 cents, baby, a nickel.
Yeah, they got
Yeah.
a big one there.
But I don't understand.
I guess the biggest one.
It's an
They got the
American
biggest
nickel?
one. No, it's a Canadian nickel. We got nickels too.
Maybe we
got a-
should. This is what
It's
we
got
do.
a beaver on it.
Let's do a 3-story nickel,
Easy.
and just so we can get in the Book of World Records.
I do want to talk about change for a second here. I do want to talk about change for a second here.
Oh man,
No wonder.
the loony.
No wonder
We're
they
gonna talk
hate
about
us.
the loony.
No, not the. I'm not even gonna do that. That's bullshit. I'm not even gonna mess with you guys' funny money because it's worth nothing, and I don't want to fuck with you guys. I assume it's worth nothing. It's worth nothing to me. People are really pushing back about its pennies right now in America, and I want to say that I'm pro penny, and I think we should have more of them.
More pennies.
I love pennies. I love the jingle jangle of a penny in my pocket.
You love walking down the street with your pocket bulging and you're feeling a little uncomfortable, but you know you have just enough money to get like a chocolate bar.
Just enough money's of pennies to get a chocolate bar. No, it's because what I do is when some guy fucking covered in sweat, panting, small dick bulge in his fucking running shorts, comes up to me, takes out his AirPod, is like, "Oh, I was just listening to the show." I love to flick him a penny and say, "Hey, don't spend it all in one place, kid." That's what I do. And if they try to take that from me, I don't know how I'll interact with listeners.
You'd have to do it with a nickel.
That's too much. That's not made of money here. So, okay, the Waffen-SS is being brought into these mines.
Yes. So I'm going to read from the Ottawa Citizen, November 15th, 1993. And like, it is kind of interesting that this is the tenor of writing about this back in the 90s. And this would not happen today. Like this article would not be published. No thanks to sort of the efforts of all of these groups that we're talking about. But back in the 90s, it was open season. You know, we were convicting Ernst Zundel of hate crimes, and the Ottawa Citizen could write this. It says, a 32-year-old RCMP report which provides details into a riot that occurred outside Mine Mills Union Hall, August 1961, says many of the rioters were former Nazi stormtroopers and Hungarian freedom fighters, and that's in quotation marks, opposed to communism, who had been imported by INCO. The report prepared by the RCMP's former Security and Intelligence Branch was obtained under the Freedom of Information Act. The article goes on to quote former president of Local 598, Mike Solsky, who says the RCMP did nothing to stop the riot aside from taking down a hammer and sickle flag based of one of the strikers that one of the strikers had hung up setting roadblocks. So this is interesting. This union boss describes how the union members figured out this plot to subvert the union and put in these Nazi spies. We were talking about the tattoos earlier, right?
Yeah, the Waffen-SS tattoos or the SS tattoos that were underneath the armpit that said your blood type, that were literally one of the most, if you're completely naked, you could identify a member of the SS by, they were basically the only guys that had these.
Correct. So Mike says, I remember a couple of guys who'd been in the army during the war. They were getting changed when they saw two new workers who had SS tattoos. They beat the hell out of them. We didn't see them around after that. There's another bit of testimony here from a former union member who says that the federal government and corporations deliberately encouraged the immigration of these Nazi and fascist supporters to basically spy on and lead the battle against trade union movement. He says, you can say that they were anti-communist, but they were really fascist collaborators during the war. The government knew what it was doing. Essentially, it was a conscious effort to roll back the labor movement. They were, so during this time, the RCMP admits that they were surveilling workers. Between 1937 and 1969, there are 9,000 pages of RCMP surveillance that was uncovered by this Freedom of Information Act request. It's a long fucking time.
Well, I want to go
69.
back to sort of like the beginning of the last episode where we talked about all of these fascist groups and these intellectuals who were, kind of centered around the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalist Front groups in Canada. With almost all of these guys' biographies that I read, they all spied for the RCMP. Mm-hmm. And so all of the, even prior to World War II, these people were working hand in glove with the Canadian government for the suppression of labor organizing and for actually just like ethnic Ukrainian organizing done shorn of there's political context, but without like some things without necessarily a political message, like a dance or a music recital or something. Yeah. These were being surveilled by these right-wing, like Hetmanite fascist organizations for the RCMP.
Yeah, and the only people that the RCMP love to surveil more than suspected communists are indigenous groups who get uppity.
Yes, yeah.
There's a long history of sort of almost counterinsurgency type techniques used by the RCMP on land defense, like on the Kanasatake or recently the Wet'suwet'en land defenders. RCMP bust in special agents to essentially surveil these people who are now being testified against in court,
So the deal is with after World War II, right? I mean, people know this at this point. Like, okay, yes, we had Operation Paperclip. We imported all these Nazi guys. But that's like a completely different story. We've talked about the Spider Network before with all of the guys fleeing to South America. And we've talked before about the World Anti-Communist League and the Anti-Bolshevik Bloc of Nations. But I think some of that deserves reiteration.
Yeah, this is more of the Worm Consortium than the Spider Network.
Definitely, yes. So, all right, 1943, an important year because what was happening right then? The Holocaust and the invasion of Russia by Nazi Germany and its quisling allies in these various states they had taken over at that point, I guess, republics of the USSR that they had taken over on their way to try to get to Moscow. 1943, there is a conference that happens in, I think, Ukraine, which is a continuation of the Nazi government's, quote, captive populist anti-communist crusade.
The Captive Nations, yeah.
Captive Nations, yeah. So this was, in fact, started as a project by a little guy that historians of Nazi Germany might remember named Alfred Rosenberg, who was the most like, I know, Jewish last name too, notorious Nazi ideologist, head of the puppet Eastern governments, and one of the architects of the Holocaust. I mean, this is like one of the guys who was like the brains behind Nazi ideology here was Alfred Rosenberg. And he says, hey, let's have this little conference here, get you guys together. And I looked at all the guys that were in it. I was looking at the Ukrainian website and it's like describing, I got to be honest, some of these nationalities and ethnicities I never heard of. Like, we got like B tier guys in here. Like, I'm sorry, there's like 600 of you guys and you speak like some dialect of Ukrainian and you like live around the Black Sea, but like, you're not really a captive nation. It's just like a captive village, maybe. I don't know. But, it's started by the OUN. It's attended by the Iron Guard, who I think it should be said are notorious for hanging Jews on meat hooks in Romania. It is supported by the Arrow Cross Party, of whom members were later imported into Canada into nickel mines. And these guys are just like, it's basically every guy who had tried to kill as many Jews as possible pre-war and were trying to kill as many Jews as possible during the war gathered in one place to talk about, hey, we all hate Bolshevism, we should support the Nazis. Second in command was a Latvian named Alfred Berzins, who was a Nazi. And the first in command was a guy named Yaroslav Stetsko, who remained so for the rest of his life, very close to Ronald Reagan. Yeah, and in fact, I believe in a direct continuation from that 1943 conference that was started by Alfred Rosenberg and the Nazi Party in 1943 to continue the Holocaust. In fact, inaugurated Captive Nations Week in D.C. with Ronald Reagan.
Correct. Also, that organization was then helmed in a dynastic way by Yaroslav's wife, Slava Stetsko, who we'll meet in a little bit.
I mean, this had the Anti-Bolshevik Bloc of Nations, which is what this organization became, had basically everybody who had killed 50 or more Jews was given automatic membership in this motherfucker. It is a collection of the most disgusting fucking freaks from World War II that you could ever imagine. For instance, I was reading a report. In fact, it's on the CIA website. It's like some FOIA thing. Apparently, this report is to the CIA. Ivan Doshev. This is just a guy that we're using as an example, but he's an activist with the Anti-Bolshevik Bloc of Nations in the post-war period. Ivan Dovchev, a fascist Bulgarian who met Hitler in 1934, he was accused of murdering every Jew in the town he was mayor of by the Soviets, seemingly asking the CIA for funds to purchase a farm that might train recruits for anti-Bulgarian operations in Bulgaria, behind the Iron Curtain. The farm was located in Canada.
Yeah, that's right. So this guy's plan was to train super commandos who would then be re-imported to Bulgaria and take down Todor Zhivkov, who was the Bulgarian leader at the time. And, you can see this played out over and over again in these different loser diaspora groups. Like, there's a strong echo of that with Cuban expats working with organized crime and the CIA to try and take down Fidel Castro. Right?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, this was the plan, right? Like the CIA, or and during the war and the immediate post-war period, it's the OSS, right? And later becomes the CIA a few years later. But like even during the war, they're all over Europe talking to Nazis, talking to, maybe after Italy goes down, talking to the Italians and being like, listen, there's another war coming and we got to fight it. So like your strongest anti-communists have to come over to our side. Now the strongest anti-communists in all of these countries were just coincidentally some of the most vicious and brutal killers of Jews and other minorities that you could ever fucking imagine. And so what we did is we brought all of these guys over. We didn't just bring the scientists. We brought like basically every thug and killer either over to America or kept them in like West Germany, Paris, London, and then sent them on behind enemy lines operations in Ukraine, in Bulgaria, in Belarus. And
Which we should say were universally completely unsuccessful.
Yes.
I just read a book about Soviet counterinsurgency in the immediate post-war period. And there's a lot of like stuff that was sort of Soviet archives that were unsealed after the fall of communism and the dissolution of the USSR. And again, like that book we were talking about in the last episode, the testimonials by not just Soviet operatives, but testimonials by citizenry was just like these guys would come in and like kill a school teacher and hang her body outside of a school. That's the best they could do.
yeah, thankfully, a guy named Kim Philby, who the show has spoken in support of several times, he was one of the people who was involved in this operation. In fact, it's mentioned in the Rodell report. And he was a double for the Soviets and probably one of the most successful double agents in history. And he was just giving like all the locations to the Soviets. Like, okay, they're paradropping in here. You can take them out here. And they were just like they were rolling up these guys. I mean, this is a very famous part of this. They rolled up these guys pretty easily. The OUN, and then of course they eventually killed Bandera. I think in West Germany, in Munich. I think. I mean, I can't remember exactly.
He was assassinated
in the mid 1950s, which I support and I respect. Canada, it really does seem, was just following the Brits in the U.S. in this. Like Canada, it seemed like they imported like all of these guys to kind of work as labor and then sort of farm them out to let's say more able intelligence services.
We were really, it's interesting because I think the lack of control over these groups was different than in the United States and the UK. I think the US, maybe some of the Cubans got out of control, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think in terms of post-war Eastern European fascists, they had a pretty tight noose on them. And in Canada, we got up to some insane shit. And, should we talk about, if we're moving it in, out of the Anti-Bolshevik League of Nations, we should probably talk about their biggest accomplishment, which is Black Ribbon Day.
Yeah, I want to. What is that? You guys' like version of the poppy? What's Black Ribbon Day?
Well, Black Ribbon Day in Canada, we're taught that Black Ribbon Day is an internationally celebrated holiday, which I thought was true until I became an adult.
Liz, have you ever heard of Black Ribbon Day?
Literally, I have no idea what that is.
Young Chomsky, have you ever heard of?
I have a better idea what Boxing Day is.
Does that have to do with My Chemical Romance fandom?
Yeah.
Black Ribbon Day is celebrated in Canada, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, and Ukraine, which is going to give you an idea of what it's about.
Interesting.
So Black Ribbon Day is the holiday version of the memorial that we're talking about, the monument. So it is a day that honors the death of everyone who was killed by communist regime, including Nazis. And it was the brainchild of this Estonian Canadian named Marcus Hess. We're talking about Yaroslav Stetsko and the Anti-Bolshevik League of Nations. There's a famous picture of Hess seated with Stetsko's wife at the Anti-Bolshevik League of Nations headquarters in Munich. Mm-hmm. And if you look closely at the picture, well, you don't have to look that closely because it's real big. But behind them is an enormous bust of Roman Shukiewicz, the guy, the guy who commanded the Noctigal Battalion, who listeners will remember from the last episode, were responsible for the massacre of 300,000 Jews and Poles during the Second World War. So Hess does a sort of a PR tour with the help of the Anti-Bolshevik League of Nations, comes back to Canada, and with the help of something called the Canadian Taxpayers Federation.
I love that name.
Can you guys guess where on the political foursquare Canadian Taxpayers Federation?
Where it's on? Like up, it's got to be up by wherever the Chamber of Commerce is, where it has that great like neutral name that everyone's like, that's just an organization for good business and government. Is it like insanely right-wing?
Well, we had the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association in California. I'm gonna guess it's libertarian-ish.
Yeah, it's a fully libertarian. Like they kind of flirted with the Social Credit Party, who I believe you guys have mentioned on the show before.
Yeah, that's
and actually, I didn't mention in the last episode, but I should mention the Social Credit Party's Ukrainian Canadian representatives in Parliament were instrumental in public pressure in bringing members of the Waffen SS over to Ukraine in the immediate post-war. Klimka was the guy that did it. Go on.
Correct. Yeah. So Black Ribbon Day has this very messy birth where Marcus, the Estonian Canadian, who is part of the Estonian Canadian Council, which is the Estonian counterpart to the Ukrainian, the UCC. His issue is to get all of these diasporas to agree to get behind Black Ribbon Day, and he has the hardest time with the Poles. Because the Poles kind of still remember that this is 1985, 86. They kind of still rest within living memory. But he sort of steamrolls that with the help of the government. And in, I believe it's late 1985, 1986, with the help of Anti-Bolshevik League of Nations and all these disgusting fascists that, Bryce, you were describing, they produce a television commercial announcing that Black Ribbon Day is a thing, and then explaining to people about the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. And
that's a crazy commercial. That's a crazy idea for a commercial.
Yeah. And that is the first moment that there's some kind of mass-produced, signed off on by the Canadian government, piece of culture for Canadians to look at and to sort of rewire their conception of the Second World War. And it is the very anti-Semitic myth of the double genocide.
Yeah. Can you explain what the double genocide is?
The Nazis were bad, but the communists were just as bad and maybe even worse.
Well, it's interesting because the double genocide theory, I think the most popular proponent of which is Timothy Snyder, who, by the way, don't be reading. That guy's a fucking idiot. You remember when you were seeing his book on fascism in every fucking bookstore? Guy can suck my fucking dick. But it's interesting because I've only ever seen it deployed in defense of people who actually did side with one side of that genocide. You see it. I really just don't understand this logic because I'm like, okay, we're stuck between the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany, and so you had to fight with Nazi Germany. Well, why didn't you have to fight with the Soviet Union? I don't understand it. You fought with the guys who did the Holocaust, and so it's like I understand if you're stuck between these two bad things. Well, you chose one of the bad things. You didn't.
You chose the bad one.
But how come one of the bad ones defeated the other bad one?
Exactly. Yeah. Well, we helped, and
did they really defeat them though? That's the question.
To the Allies' great shame is we helped them do it a little bit. And we helped them defeat them. I think the thing that pisses me off the most about this is that, yes, there were insurgents in some of these organizations in the Ukraine. The Ukrainians had some people that did fight in a sort of bandit style way against the Nazis. But the reality is the bulk of this was fighting on the side of the Nazis. It is just incontrovertible. And they try to retcon that with fucking oh, they put Bandera in a concentration camp. They didn't put him in the fucking gas chamber. They put him in like a fucking in like a kind of nice prison in one of these camps. They had different like areas in concentration camps for politicals and sometimes or like for important political figures from countries that they maybe had some kind of funny relationships with, and they put Bandera in one of those. They didn't put him in fucking barracks with the fucking Jews. And I'm not trying to say like, oh, there was good parts of the concentration camp. But there was a better part of the concentration camp, and they put this guy in it. It was not a fucking death camp. They didn't fucking gas the fucking OUN. They put him in like a fucking house. He just couldn't leave the camp. And this is, by the way, after he had already collaborated with them in doing the Holocaust.
Exactly.
Sorry.
And the purpose of this bullshit holiday is to obfuscate all of that, is to confuse it and to sort of eliminate it as an argument, which is insane. And in case people are like, oh, well, these are ideologues or they didn't know what they're doing or they don't have historical context, I have a really good quote from one of the two architects of Black Ribbon Day, this historical revisionist project. His name is David Somerville. He was a member of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. And this is him in a 2014 book about how they were going to sell the public on this. It was a revelation to use the public's pre-existing revulsion for the Nazis to get them to feel similarly towards Soviet communists. In condemning both of the regimes simultaneously, it will be impossible for critics to attack us as right-wing extremists or Nazi sympathizers. Now, never mind the fact that the person who bankrolled all of this historical revisionist project in the form of Black Ribbon Day, was the quote-unquote uranium king of Canada, Stefan Roman, who happened to be a major force in the Anti-Bolshevik League of Nations on behalf of the Slovakians and was part of an international organization devoted to glorifying Slovakia's Nazi puppet regime. So there you go.
Which
That's
was, I
Black
believe,
Ribbon
am
Day.
I crazy? Was that the Catholic one? But I
Yeah,
literally can't remember. I think it
so.
was. That's very interesting. And so,
Yes.
but,
A holiday I thought was real and internationally celebrated until very recently.
wait, I don't understand. Do you guys actually celebrate this in Canada?
Every year, Justin Trudeau, lately it's been Justin Trudeau, tweets out, today we remember Black Ribbon Day. Yeah, if you just search Justin Trudeau Black Ribbon Day, you'll see his...
Today on Black Ribbon Day, we honor the millions of people who suffered or were senselessly murdered at the hands of Nazi and Soviet regimes in Europe. The day coincides with the signing of Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact by the totalitarian regimes of Nazi Germany and Soviet Union 85 years ago, blah, 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 blah. As a result, this is incredible. As a result, millions of people suffered tremendously under totalitarian regimes, including Jewish, Romani, Slavic, and I shit you not, 2S LGBTQI plus communities,
That
as
is
well as
two-spirit
person
for...
with disabilities.
Wait, 2S?
The
2S,
Nazis killed two-spirit
two-spirit.
people? That's news to me.
I fucking hate our government so much, and I cannot wait for them to be humiliated. And I know that the people they're up against are craven morons, but it's just like enough is enough with this guy.
It's so crazy to say that. All those poor two-spirit people who suffered under the Soviet Union. Oh no!
By two-spirit, he means your mother was Ruthenian and your dad was Transcarpathian.
Yeah, well, no, the two spirits you have in here is you're Catholic, but you also have the spirit of Wotan in you.
Exactly.
That's amazing. I mean, yeah, I think really not enough can be said about the Anti-Bolshevik Bloc of nations being like legit a genuine like pro-SS, pro-Nazi, pro-Holocaust, CIA backed and involved with organization, and they are instrumental in setting up a fucking Canadian holiday? Insane to me. You guys wear black ribbons?
I don't remember anyone wearing a black. That would be funny if everybody was like, it was like Black Ribbon Day, time to put on your black armbands.
I kind of assumed it was like the
Is
poppy.
it like an American holiday where it means that there's lots of doorbusters?
What's a doorbuster?
See, come on, big sale.
Oh,
That's
I
what they
didn't know.
call them in the
okay.
commercials.
Yeah, Black
All
Ribbon
right,
Day sale.
doorbusters. Yeah. A lot of.
Yeah, you can buy gold teeth, eyeglasses.
I was going to make that joke,
Sale
and I
on
was like, I'm not allowed to
tattoos.
make this joke.
You can
Yeah.
Beckner. What is that?
Never mind. It's not.
What's Beckner?
It's German.
Interesting. You mean the third biggest group? And by the way, a lot of Germans, this is the thing too, and not to go backwards in time, but during post-war Canadian immigration, a big way to get over there is if you knew somebody who lived there. And there was a lot of Germans in Canada who were like, oh yeah, my boy was my cousin's was a Volksdeutsch who somehow ended up in West Germany after the war. He can come over. He doesn't need a security screening. Please, please, please.
Approved.
I want to ask about I've used as a source, not really as a source, actually. I've just checked sources against to see what it doesn't mention, the Encyclopedia of Ukraine. And I know that was a project of Ukrainian nationalists, in fact, particularly a project of somebody who was basically one of the heads of the Waffen-SS, Galicia Division. But it also had help from the Canadian government and from Canadian public institutions. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
So, if you're trying to rewrite history, one of the best avenues to do it, besides commercials, besides mass media, is to get into academia, to position yourself in academia, because then you're actually writing it. You're writing the fucking book. You're writing the Encyclopedia of Ukraine, and it's going to be cited on Wikipedia articles, right? And they knew this. So back in the 80s, the University of Alberta had a chancellor whose name was Peter Savarian. And Peter Savarian was an ex-Waffen-SS 14th guy.
Well, maybe he just supported his fellow chancellor, Chancellor Adolf Hitler.
Exactly. He was also president of the Progressive Conservative Party of Canada. And he even got the Order of Canada medal. So, he was in the same unit that Hunka was in. So Hunka got a standing ovation. But back in 1987, this guy who volunteered to fight for the Nazis was given the highest medal that Canada has to give out, the Order of Canada.
Also, the University of Alberta, I do want to say really quick, had a Hunka research endowment that they had to shut down during the scandal of Hunka. So the scandal of Hunka.
The Hunka research endowment?
Hunka-gate.
Which I I'm just going to, I haven't looked into it, but obviously my first question would be, did they know each other?
Oh.
I'm sure they did. Hunka's family donated, I believe it was $30,000, and then there was an internal conflict at the University of Alberta around whether they should accept the money. Peter Savarian helped set up the Institute of Ukrainian Studies, which has produced some good stuff. Like John Paul Himka has written some pretty balanced stuff about Ukraine during the war, but for the most part, it is a vector for the rewriting of history, mainly in the form of the Encyclopedia of Ukraine, which the university got $500,000 from the Alberta government in an endowment to publish this thing. And I'm going to remind listeners that the guy who wrote it, Kubievich, at this point is in exile in Paris. This is a guy who could have gone to Nuremberg, and he is writing the definitive history of Ukraine with help from the Canadian government and a former Waffen-SS soldier.
I think the important thing to note there too is that there's been a lot of people we've talked about in these episodes that were members of the Waffen-SS who helped do the Holocaust. There are people in here who have been concentration camp guards, which a lot of these the Heavies were actually sent to do. So little of this is mentioned, if any, and some of this is very noticeably excised from the Encyclopedia of Ukraine. That I would say that it functions essentially as a Holocaust revisionist document.
That's absolutely, definitely. And again, we got to say, this is a vision of Ukraine's history and possible future from a very small slice of Ukrainians. Right? It's not it's not, Brace, you've been to Odessa, it's not this mindset is not representative of of Ukraine as a whole, as the Ukrainian people as a whole.
No, that's the thing. It has been taken over. It's interesting. I mean, this happened in a lot of Eastern European states. Like, they had these governments in exile. They had these members of like the ABN and like the World Anti-Communist League that were like these rabid fascists. And then after the fall of communism in a lot of these countries, those people came back, and like that narrative, the narrative that had been embraced by the West, that had been embraced by like these powerful governments in the US and Britain and Canada and Germany, now became the dominant narrative, because that's the people that we were used to dealing with.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's an anti-com, and again, harkening back to like post-war Canadian immigration restrictions, anti-communism is the number one, like, most looked for valuable trait in anybody that we're dealing with from a foreign country. So we've talked about the Deschênes Commission in a couple of these, various points. We've read from it. I want to make clear, there were rumors harkening back from like the 1950s, and not just rumors, there were actually direct accusations by the Soviets and then eventually by the West German even government that there were Nazi war criminals that were in Canada. At one point, Mengele was rumored to be in Canada, going by the name Menk, I believe living in a Ontario suburb. Apparently not true, but who knows? I think Martin Bormann was rumored to be living there at one point, and there was all these. There was a real like sense that there were all of these Nazi war criminals that were in Canada.
Yeah, I mean there are Jewish archives in Montreal that have first person testimonial from the early 1950s of, like, let's say a group of guys walking down St. Laurent and they notice someone who was a camp guard.
Yeah,
and they this was happening a lot. And the RCMP did not do anything about it. These were never followed up on. And this culminates in the Deschênes Commission, much later in the 80s.
Hey, so that's the end of the extended preview. If you want to hear more, which obviously you do, you want to hear more, hear the whole episode, you can at patreon.com/TrueAnonPod. That's patreon.com/TrueAnonPod. Bye-bye.
Let's go shoot. Jeffrey Epstein. Let's go shoot. Jeffrey Epstein. Let's go shoot. Jeffrey Epstein.